1, go.
Woo! Oh, someone got vigorous in there.
that was a boomer, that one.
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna start doing it by just slamming both hands on the table.
Oh, you need to get those, like, we need to start doing this with like clap sticks, like where you have 2 pieces of wood on a hinge.
No, starter pistol.
So yeah, I don't really have slides prepped for this one, but at a couple of points I will probably ask you guys to just look up pictures, but most of them, like one of the main ones we're going to talk about. Sorry, I just have to respond to something really quick. Yeah, I'm just going to look up Jack Parsons right now, go to images. First picture is not a pipe bomb. Second and third pictures, pipe bomb. 10th picture, pipe bomb. 12th picture, pipe bomb. Yeah, and then we're just about done with the pipe bomb images.
No, the pipe bomb's gonna be like the end cut screen.
Yeah, like we find out that Jack Parsons dies in an explosion later in his life, and we find out that those pictures were taken moments before. Like he'd just gotten into building pipe bombs.
The last known picture of him is just a
tragic hobby pipe bomb enthusiast, killed in unexpected accident,
betrayed by his own doohickey.
Oh, the proud doohickey manufacturer has got to be.
It's a real cottage industry that we can't let it go.
Can't do that anymore because of woke.
Yeah,
you can only make.
We used to build things, and the things we used to build smash cut. I do kind of like the idea, especially. I was watching this video recently. I've always been a big fan of the work of a submarine expert called H.I. Sutton. And one of the things he talks about is narco submarines, and specifically how there are different master builders of these submarines. Like they have different design elements they have different ways of solving the same problems. So you can look at a submarine and see like each of them is artisanally made by a different dude in the cartel who has, like, I'm sure, very strong opinions about where the prop should go.
Hell yeah, Renaissance Italy.
I love the idea of like looking at the doohickey after it's assassinated in a politician and just like, what? Oh, I know this guy. This is like some real artisanal stuff. He never makes the same doohickey twice.
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't have the money, you can only afford to get a poor patrons can only get a contraption. They can't afford a true doohickey.
To call this IED improvised in any sense is a disservice. This was meticulously crafted.
But it's still like, even the most refined, I like the idea of even the most refined doohickey has to look like it came out of a Rust or Metro game. The best a doohickey can ever look is a Kyber Pass AK. It cannot look nice.
What do you call like a shiny, polished doohickey? Would it still be a doohickey, or is the Rust?
What is a rare tier doohickey?
Wouldn't that just be
device.
The device? Yeah.
The device.
Yeah.
Started both words capitalized.
Oh, dude, device capital D registered trademark would be such a cool startup.
Don't just you can't elaborate on what you make at all outside of just
listen. The way it works, every employee is an entire design team. You are not allowed to work with anyone else. You take your product start to finish, and then we sell it.
Are you going to get a nice old doohickey, or are you going to have to go on the NFA? Who knows?
Yeah.
We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. As we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. We need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through every mistake, failure, and explosion that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
Guest Chris, he, him.
And an ornery Chris, he, him.
And today we're back for our series on Jack Parsons, the Satanist and sex warlock who helped found NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. As you heard, our returning guest is Chris, a space industry engineer working on rocket engine tests and the self-described #1 solid rocket fan. Chris, welcome back.
Good to be back. I'm glad that I have not yet been lambasted by the liquid propellant people.
It's entirely possible. Just don't check Discord. As long as you don't check where they could be doing the lambasting. Oh, that does remind me, no one has stepped up to take the mantle of #1 hybrid rocket fan, but we did have a fan point out that there is a fourth contender between the solid, hybrid, liquid kind of war, and that is electric.
Yeah, if you work with Xenon, you're doing wizardry. You do not count. You are like in a separate tier.
I appreciate that was like the compliment sandwich of like, you are a wizard. I don't understand anything you do. Also, you don't count. Also, your work is really cool.
No, it's just like you're just working like the entire mechanism of operation. Like the basic, like you're putting mass at the back is the same, but like the whole way with cathodes and anodes and stuff, it's like you're doing God's work there.
Yeah. We can caveat that the debates going on now have to involve something being ignited and not just throwing particles out the back.
There has to be just an element of class when you're accelerating your particles, not just
Well, it's just such a difficult comparison because you're talking about like, yeah, I make a Newton of thrust, but I can do it so efficiently. It's
and
like
for
such
so
a
goddamn long.
It's just such a different like scale of what you're trying to do. It's like I for the applications where electric engines are used, there is no competitor.
I'm just now imagining someone setting up like on your test stand a little electric motor, and like all of the guys working on the engine are like screaming and hooting because it's working, and everyone else is just kind of like, I guess it's glowing a little bit. Is this good? Is this bad?
Well, normally you test them in like vacuum chambers because you need to be in vacuum to really like.
Well, yeah.
To actually really register that something's happening.
The wind blew all my thrust away. Again, like you said, incredibly good at what they do, but I'm just now picturing like getting really excited as the dials all go into the red and what they're going towards is like 0.1 of a Newton.
Oh man, we're gonna
like, sir, shut her down. We can't take too much more.
Can't handle much more of this.
Sir, we have reached an apple.
And then just the test stand just detonates, xenon going everywhere.
Just going from like 3 pans of force to full detonation with no witness.
I don't even know what a failure mode on an electric motor looks like. Like, if anyone does work with electric motors, I would love to know, does it just like turn off? Does it just like kind of, is it more like a computer or something where when something goes wrong, like there might be a fire, there might be smoke, but a lot of times it just kind of turns off and you don't know why.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of ways in which it could go like horribly wrong. Like maybe there's some kind of thing where I'm imagining a failure mode where maybe it doesn't work all of it, because I know a lot of electric motors will kind of have like it'll be set up in a circle. So maybe it's possible that you could lose like a chunk of your electric motor but still have the rest working.
I would assume melting would be a failure mode.
Yeah.
I think that the failure state is when a member of the team develops a taste for xenon gas.
Ooh,
just slurping it down right out of the canister.
I'm trying to think of what xenon would do to your voice, whether it would be higher or lower, and just like going to the crew like, all right, has anyone seen the fuel? No.
Me with a suspiciously xenon gas shaped lump in my throat. No, I don't know what happened to it.
Opening my mouth and being able to propel myself with 1 Newton of force.
Yeah. Xenon is denser, so it would be deeper. So you'd be asking,
I haven't, sir.
You'd be asking the test crew and be like,
talking about.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
No.
Just a suspicious tank-shaped bulge under the shirt and the cannula going up to your nose.
So before we get into this, I believe guest Chris had something he wanted to say, something he is very sorry about, something he messed up.
I wanted to make a correction. Because mergers in the aerospace field are very confusing, I got an order of operations wrong.
God damn it.
Hercules was not bought out by Thiokol. So Hercules spun its rocket motor and other aerospace products divisions into Hercules Aerospace. So like their because their big thing they used to make was just powder, like gunpowder. So for small arms, bullets, all that kind of stuff. and they started when their rocket motor division got big, they spun it off because it's just kind of a very different world once you start getting specializing there. Hercules Aerospace was then bought by Alliant Tech Systems, ATK, in 1995. ATK bought Thiokol in 2001. Those got spun into Orbital ATK later when ATK bought Orbital Sciences.
So they got kind of like re-merged together through different corporate acquisitions?
Yeah, it wasn't... What I said was Hercules was bought by Thiokol. That was wrong. They were both bought by the same group later.
God damn it.
Because I knew that they became the same company at some point. I just got the order of operation. So I just wanted to correct that. Anyone who's like really into the history of rocket motor companies was probably like banging on the screen.
I know. Watching the Patreon and listener numbers plummet
By
and
two people.
What the fuck happened?
All two people who are really pissed about that.
Yeah, the number one liquid rocket fuel fan, he didn't even make it to the part where you challenged him at the end because he turned off as soon as we started talking about Thiokol.
Yeah. So anyways, that's how it did. But all of them were bought by Northrop Grumman when Northrop Grumman bought Orbital ATK. So that's just wanted to give that correction on the order of operations here. Again, this is aerospace mergers are kind of confusing sometimes. A lot of companies buy a lot of other companies. So that I just wanted to correct that. I want the Patreon listeners, well, not the Patreon. Only the Patreon listeners get correct information. If you're not a Patreon listener, forget that.
I'm going to cut this out for the normal non-Patreon listeners. Listener, if you want to hear accurate information, sign up for the Patreon. We tell lies on the main feed, it turns out.
You just didn't know it until now.
This is for the main feed. Rockets Work by Gnomes.
Yeah, we are a Clark Millikan fan show now. Rockets don't actually work.
Oh, God.
I was going to make a eugenics joke, but I don't want to. Also, Clark Millikan continues to be the like villain of the rest of this story forever. So fuck him forever.
Just fuck him to death.
And somewhat relating to the Patreon stuff, we normally do the little mid-roll ads, but I wanted to put this up front because we have a Discord now. So if you want to sign up for a community full of fellow space nerds and just kind of talk about nothing, consider signing up for Failure to Launch at the Patreon at any tier.
Get involved with the nonsense. Come over here. We got doohickey.
Audio doohickey.
Yeah.
I guess that's what you could. Yeah. No, I think our podcast is sufficiently jank to be considered an audio doohickey.
Yeah, dear reader, join the Discord so you can get the text-based podcast experience.
The provisional reader.
As prophesized by me just being dumb.
Now, where we left off in our story, John Whiteside Parsons, known to everyone as Jack, was working at Caltech as part of an informal rocket club known on campus as the Suicide Squad. They earned the nickname through constant failures. Sometimes these were just the natural result of working in a new and unexplored scientific field, like slowly improving rocket designs through failures, and sometimes it's just because the Suicide Squad were morons. Like that time they fumigated a building with rocket fuel and rusted everything inside.
They fumigated it with oxidizer, not fuel.
That is still my favorite thing just so far in this series, just flash rusting all of the pipes in your building.
How quickly can we Silent Hill this building?
Like, you want to talk about attacking infrastructure, that's... oh boy.
We just need to mix the fuel and the oxidizer in the air. That way it will preferentially react with the fuel.
Yeah, in this container that's building shaped.
Putting a nozzle on top of the Galcit building and going like, it's the only way to burn it out. We're going to have to light this sucker up and see how it handles combustion. Let's see how high this building can go.
No, we're just going to force it deeper into the ground.
What is the ISP on the Galcit building?
I mean, that's more of a measure of propellants and nozzle than anything.
Okay, fine. I work in parachutes. They go down.
Yeah, listen, what you'd want to measure in the Galcit building would probably be your payload ratio. How much of the building is actually carrying payload? How much are you just moving the structure? How much is just fuel and oxidizer itself?
I could absolutely see the Suicide Squad going to Von Karman like, we need to knock down these walls. Our mass fraction is all out of whack. This building is much bigger than it needs to be.
Just go to the nozzle, light in the building, begins a rapid 3-dimensional search for all of its funding.
So, what started off as just Jack and his best friend Ed Foreman working with Caltech student Frank Molina had slowly turned into a multidisciplinary team that included future rocket visionaries like Zien Sushen. They worked under the auspices of famed engineer Theodore von Karman and mostly funded themselves with a mysterious $1,000 grant that their cameraman was able to find but never explain.
Yeah, he stabbed someone.
Again, I'm still loving that all of their cash is just coming from the guy Weld Arnold just has mystery money and he will never tell them where it comes from. And that story gets even funnier soon.
Through Thelemic practices, I've summoned this CVS bag full of bills.
And again, yeah, just the fact that he paid them his first installment of $500 was mostly in crumpled up 1s and 5s.
Yeah, there's shaking hands with old school rocket testers. Where the money comes from is confusing and a mystery.
Don't ask.
I mean, in real life, we have to deal with like the color of money as an issue. Like, you know, is this test funds? Is this R&D funds? Is this is this construction for all the like weird labels? And you're just like, this is materials dollars only. This is labor dollars only.
Weld Arnold gave them that kind of freedom. They didn't need to worry about that. They just went into wherever Weld Arnold was, presumably with a huge burlap sack with a dollar bill on the side, and they just reached in, pulled out some money.
Yeah, Weld Arnold coming at them with a bag of money, but it's broken up into WBSs. It's like, here's your labor bag, here's your materials bag. This is construction only. You can't touch this for 5 years.
He's just been prescient and labeled 90% of it for repairs.
Just the bag explicitly labeled tube replacement.
He's put a bomb in it so it'll blow up the bag when the funding expires in 2 years.
Yeah, where do you think he found the bomb that he was holding? It was in the bag.
Jack in court.
Jackin' in court.
Jackin' in court. That's how he got into court. That's how he got charged. Now, while Jack spent most of his time working on new rocket designs, he also found time for extracurriculars, and the one that made his name in LA was that time he became an amateur explosives expert and solved a bomb plot.
I'm gonna need more here.
This story is going to evolve in weird ways where like different things are happening at once. In between doing rocketry and sex magic, he also does like Hardy Boys mystery stuff.
Okay, that's pretty. Solving crimes with Thelema.
Jack and Ed oh, dude, if you were using Thelema to like, doing a seance with the victim of the bomb plot to figure out what happened, that would rule.
Sir and or madam, does this pipe bomb look familiar?
Dude, Jack and Ed Adventures would be a much better book than the one they actually wrote.
I love it.
Now, to properly explain this, I need to get across just how comically corrupt LA was in the 1930s under its mayor, Frank Shaw. And I know, like, yeah, jokes, city governments today corrupt. Absolutely. Go listen to No Gods, No Mayors. Very fun examples.
No, we're talking about that S-tier corruption here.
LA in the 1930s was like we're going to get to this. They set bombs against people they don't like. Quote, prostitution prospered, gambling was endemic, and bribery was a way of life. The cops were on the take, and Police Chief James Davis openly boasted of his shoot first, ask questions later policy. Even the district attorney was operating under a felony indictment. By 1937, an estimated 600 brothels, 300 gambling houses, 1,800 illegal bookies, and 23,000 prohibited slot machines were scattered across the city. And all of this was funneling money right to the mayor. With the cops being part of the problem, the main force for fighting corruption was citizen groups like Civic, or the Citizens Independent Vice Investigating Committee, and its head, Clifford Clinton.
That's a fucking name.
It is a name. He also, he worked at a cafeteria and just one day decided, I'm going to take on all the corruption in this city.
You know, you fucking go.
Honestly, yeah. But investigating a corrupt system has its hazards when that system can crush you. In 1937, Clinton filed a grand jury report on the corruption of LA's public officials, identifying more than 1,000 individual cases of corruption, blackmail, and racketeering. For this, he was labeled public enemy number 1 by the LA Times. The cafeteria where he worked was accused of health hazards nonstop, and the police set off a bomb in his home, nearly killing his wife and children.
What the?
It seems like it escalated quickly.
Yeah, the city bomb layer has made a trip out to you.
That is not intimidating a guy to shut up. That is a superhero origin story of the corrupt cops blew up my wife and children, and now I'm like the Punisher.
Jesus.
This was also something of like a trend because in 1938, Harry Raymond, an ex-cop working as an investigator for Civic, barely survived a car bomb. And like a well-built one. This was not amateur stuff. Like this was a well-done car bombing that he just happened to barely, like, he got like critically injured.
Just that lucky.
And this was a step too far even for LA, and evidence quickly pointed to a police captain, 𝕿𝖍𝖊, and 2 of his detectives. His trial, the 𝕿𝖊𝖊 trial, became national news, especially because the prosecution argued the conspiracy went much higher than a random police captain, but right to Mayor Shaw. So how Jack got involved in all of this is, in the blast site, they recovered a piece of the bomb's fuse, and that perfectly matched a reel of fuse wire that 𝕿𝖊𝖊 had in his garage for no reason.
Come on, that's amateur right there.
Golly gee, I don't know how that got there. What, a guy can't just play with his fuse? I use it as a hula hoop.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. The prosecution first tried to get Caltech scientists to weigh in, but they all pointed toward Jack. Whether they meant it genuinely or were just trying to get rid of the prosecutors, Jack was eager to sign on and used his vast hands-on experience with explosives to do some of the world's first, basically forensic bomb analysis. Quote, "The bomb container in the 𝕿𝖊𝖊 case had been torn into tiny pieces. After making numerous tests, he narrowed the possible explosive down to a high explosive, a nitrocellulose-based smokeless powder similar to those he had helped create at the Halifax and Hercules powder companies. In fact, Parsons had even considered using it as a fuel for his own rockets."
Wait a second, I know this bomb. I've worked with you before.
Yeah, like him just looking at it like, oh yeah, lot 237, I mixed that one. He's just like tasting it. Yep, that's my signature right there. Now, Jack being Jack, he then built a perfect replica of the bomb, fuse and all, and brought it to the stand when he was called to testify. This is also where, like, if you look up any picture of Jack Parsons, one of the first you will see is him from the newspapers holding up a pipe bomb. This replica was so good that despite Jack telling everyone he hadn't actually filled it with explosives, the judge refused to let anyone go near it. Again, this is also just who Jack is. You know, like, he will absolutely, he just builds a pipe bomb and shows it to you. And so, like, yeah, this is how I would have done it. This is how I would have done this attempted murder.
Can we talk about his hair? Like, goddamn, styling.
Incredible. Yeah.
Okay, no, I was actually about to say, like, I'm just imagining that, like, it's not even like a cutaway or anything. It's just a pipe with a cap on it. And like, he's just like, I can open it up and show you there's no explosive. And then the judge is like, no, you're going to blow it up. Stop.
Guards like sprinting to tackle him. Watch, I'll even light the fuse. It'll go all the way to the end and then nothing will happen. It'll be a sparkler. And then everyone's just like sweating as they watch it.
In reality, it's a birthday fight, like, what's it called? Sparkler for the judge.
I think they just reacted because he was the first person in the 1930s to be like, what if I made my hair look good?
Well, he's using rocket fuel as pomade. He's just discovered the perfect use for aniline.
I mean, look at it. The hair, the mustache, that intense stare.
We talked about it last time. Look at his pores. Look at his skin.
He's in a constant state of exfoliation and defoliation.
At the same time, Jack being Jack, I absolutely could have seen him doing like almost pulling a 𝕿𝖊𝖊𝖑 of like showing up with the bomb and going like, no, this isn't the one he used. This is a better bomb. This is how I would have done it. And just like laying into the guy like, that was a shitty bomb. You picked the wrong fuel. I would have like, no, like you should have come to me. I would have set you up properly. This is amateur hour.
Then deploying the bomb.
Jack Parsons accidentally develops and sets off the world's first atomic weapon just to prove that he can.
It has to be inside the Galset building still.
Yeah, of course. Theodore von Karman just saying, oh, what the fuck are they up to now? We will also get to it. I don't know if in this episode or the next one, but Theodore von Karman also has a kind of, he's like an elder Jack Parsons in that he's also fucking insane whenever it comes to tests. It's very fun and very kind of cute. Everyone who works with him, like all the way down to like the newest students who work with Theodore von Karman, they all know that he has a mythical technomancer level to destroy anything by poking it.
Judging by that face, I believe it intrinsically.
I will say, as someone who did like aerospace stuff in college, The name von Karman comes up all the time.
Oh, yeah.
They do not. Parsons does not.
And yeah, like the reason why we have the von Karman line named after him, the legal definition of space. But also there's all kinds of stories, like all through the Suicide Squad's work, von Karman will just come over and just like, oh yeah, like what's that do? And he will just turn a dial and suddenly the rocket doesn't work anymore.
Chaos agent.
There's one example where whenever they're working on what we'll get to later, they're at this airbase and they see a new prototype fighter. I think it's a P-51 Mustang while it's still a prototype. And the pilot just lets von Karman get up in there and just kind of poke around at stuff. And he immediately, accidentally, he points at a random lever, goes, what's that do? Pulls it. And the flotation devices built into the plane all just explode out.
God bless him.
Just to show that, like, with the rocket industry, with the space industry at the time, there were no, like, professionals and crazy ones. It's all just different degrees of crazy. Jack is kind of at the far end, but, like, Theodore von Karman is also going to act like an idiot all the time.
No, I gotta say, just the energy of asking, what does this do? Not waiting for a response and just grab and
Finding
rip.
out.
It's the scientific method. Come on.
Yeah, you posit, you figure out a problem, and then you have a hypothesis, and that hypothesis is, if I pull the lever, I will figure out what it does.
Again, if you take any aerodynamics course, von Karman's name is on like multiple different things you'll study, like von Karman vortex sheets, von Karman equation. Like you'll see his name everywhere. So, you know, maybe he just was able to discover everything because he just kept screwing things up in a way that was able to be studied.
In fairness, I think a lot of his achievements were kind of on paper, like a very good physicist, a very good mathematician, because all of his mechanical engineering experience was just like magically being able to break something by touching it. He had like machine apathy or like antipathy, I guess. Now, getting back to the trial, it's not clear exactly how much Jack's testimony actually like swayed the results of the trial, like if it would have gone one way or the other without him. All three defendants would be convicted of attempted murder. But what it did do was make Jack an overnight celebrity. He wasn't the only scientist to testify that day, but he was the only one with charisma and with a fake bomb.
As far as you know.
Not to mention his young age. He was like 24 at the time. He showed up in practically every West Coast newspaper as a wunderkind explosives expert. This was Jack's first dalliance with fame and infamy, but it would not be the last.
The rise and fall of the Suicide Squad.
Now, 1938 saw a lot of changes in fortune for the Suicide Squad. While they continued their work, they weren't able to come up with ways to expand their operations or bring in new funding. The mysterious Weld-Arnold Fund was a lot, but they couldn't run a rocket program on it forever. But with his newfound fame from the Kinnett case, Jack Parsons came up with an ingenious solution. They'd sell a novel. An author self-insert YA novel. My dude is gonna write the next Maze Runner, but it's gonna be him as the hero.
Man, it's really unfortunate that Jack Parsons was like, you know, almost a century too late. Or too early, I guess, for Tumblr, you know?
Oh, dude, he would rule on Tumblr.
Jack Parsons must never be allowed to find out about AO3.
No, considering where he gets later in his life, AO3 would be like tame hand-holding for him. To Jack, this must have seemed like the greatest idea ever. They're in a boom town, Hollywood is right there and starting to make movies, and the book would be a rip-roaring adventure of sex and rockets. To spice things up further, they even included a bit of ripped from the headlines politics. Though it never got a title, we do have a brief rundown of the plot. First, every single character is just a stand-in for the real members of the Suicide Squad. Like, for example, they replace Zien with a guy named Lin Lao, who is debating going back and fighting the Japanese in their invasion of China. Second, the plot involves a team of daring engineers, union organizers, and misunderstood scientists working at the Institute, pushing the boundaries of rocket science. Then they're thrown into a web of espionage, murder, and mystery when a union-hating American fat cat, Franz Adams, tries to co-opt their project to sell it to the Nazis. The third act has the Parsons stand-in jumping on a Nazi plane to save the rocket plans, punching out the pilot, and escaping. This is just a fucking Indiana Jones story, but with a Satanist as the hero.
Did I hear correctly that he's like staunchly pro-union in it?
Well, we're going to get to this in just a second. Everyone in the Suicide Squad is some kind of socialist.
Hell yeah, brother. Labor is entitled to all it creates.
Oh yeah, and especially like that was meant to be the ripped from the headlines kind of thing, is like, oh, we're gonna fight fascism. We're gonna do rocketry to fight fascism. Especially because at the time it was well known that the German rocket club, the VFR, they got fully co-opted by the German military fairly early on. I think like 1935 is when, like, from that point on, Werner von Braun is straight up working for the German military.
If this guy, I better hear nothing but good things from homie here. If he starts going south, like, I'm gonna be sad.
I don't I get talking about him on Behind the Bastards. I don't necessarily think he's a bastard. I mean, he kind of is. We'll get there.
His own brand.
But yeah, still, Jack Parsons has written an Indiana Jones story in which he's trying to prevent the Nazis from getting rocket plans, and it's a self-insert.
Yeah, I mean,
it's an Omni self-insert, because literally every single character, like there's a guy based on Frank Molina, there's one on Ed Foreman, there's an Apollo Smith character who also has a Greek first name. And yeah, and then Zien is Lin Lao. Like, it is the most... that said, I want to see it. I would love to see that movie. Needless to say, though, it did not sell.
America might be a better place if it did.
They weren't ready for Jack Parsons' murder mystery.
It's kind of sick that these guys were like, yeah, we're crazy I don't want to say crazy, but yeah, we're kooks about rockets and you know, we have weird beliefs, and later in life we become sex magicians. But right now, yeah, we're committed unionists.
And yeah, this is probably a good time to talk about the political slant of the Suicide Squad, because they were not apolitical. Like I said, they were socialists almost to a man, and they kept up with the news out of Europe of a looming battle between fascism and communism. Having lived through a Great Depression that could be blamed on rampant capitalism, and with so many of their professors having fled Nazi Germany, it was simple for a lot of Caltech students to look at communism as the best alternative. The local branch of the Pasadena Communist Party was the Professional Unit 122, set up by Caltech chemist and sometime Suicide Squad member Sidney Weinbaum, and also Frank Oppenheimer, who, yes, is the brother of Robert Oppenheimer. Weinbaum knew Molina, and he knew that the Suicide Squad had, they had after-hours chats where they would frequently discuss politics, so he basically offered to, bring them into the formal structure of the Communist Party. Keep in mind, though, that even after they officially joined the party, it was mostly just people meeting and chatting. They would just hang out in, a room and just talk about politics. Quote, "Once voices had dropped and tempers cooled, the usual mixture of music and parlor games took over. Zien would sit in the corner playing his recorder while the others gamely tried to beat Weinbaum at Kriegspiel, a variant of chess. And Zien's inclusion, Zien playing a recorder in the corner, will get him deported and give China a space program."
That is just kind of every student political group ever, though, is like, no, we mainly do this just to hang out.
McCarthy holding up a picture "Sir, is this you?" And it's just a picture of Zien playing Au clair de la lune on a little plastic recorder.
Playing hot cross buns.
Hot cross buns, hot red. Get him out of here.
I like the idea that they have to do that whole connection loop as opposed to the member of the Communist Party.
Yeah, having to dig in deeper. Well, I guess part of it is that at this point, being a member of the Communist Party was not illegal. It was definitely frowned upon. It could get someone kicked out of their jobs. But legally, there was not a whole lot that could be done about it. So whenever they're given the invite, Frank Molina and Zien accepted Weinbaum's offer to actually be in the Communist Party, though they did it under a code name, which it was kind of good for security. They thought it would keep their names separate, but this actually wound up hurting them in the long run, because whenever they were faced with deportation, they were just why would you use a code name? Code names are for people who want to hide things. They're for criminals.
You know who are criminals?
If there's nothing, if the Communist Party's just benign, why are you using code names? Why are you hiding from us, the FBI?
Yeah, why are you trying to avoid state oppression from us, the state that's oppressing you?
Forced to choose, Jack actually said no. It's kind of unclear why he did that. Part of it Like the author of the biography that I used posits that it might just be like whenever they join the Communist Party, it does stay casual chats, but there's a bit more like, revolutionary calls to action, which may just not jive with Jack. He may have just wanted to like sit and talk with his friends. Whenever he was later interrogated by the FBI, he would say that he didn't like how pushy Weinbaum had been about it. He just kind of like, leave me alone. Now, like I said before, 1938 saw the Suicide Squad kind of stagnate. The Kinnett case aside, their only big moment of the year was when Howard Hughes completed his record-breaking flights around the world. While it didn't have anything to do with Jack Parsons or rockets directly, it did create a lot of media buzz around exciting aerospace developments, and it wasn't long before the Pasadena Post was writing headlines like,
Pasadena men aim at rocket altitude Mach.
My God. The media attention also brought in the crazies, like a circus daredevil who volunteered to become the first amateur astronaut and get launched into space. And the funniest part was, in reading his letter that he sent to Parsons, it's very clear that he knows he's going to die. He's explicitly saying, like, I am old, I'm about to retire, let me go out with a bang. I will be the greatest daredevil in history, I'm gonna die in space.
I'm going to become space junk.
It also gave Frank Molina the chance to speak at the Institute of Aeronautical Sciences in New York, which legitimately did signal a big step up in rocketry's acceptance as a real science. Something we talked about a lot in the last episode was that despite this being a time when all of these big scientific fields are being advanced, rocketry is still viewed almost exclusively by scientists as, like, comic book shit. It's Buck Rogers, it's like teleportation. Unfortunately, none of that translated into funds or help. As the team burned through Weld Arnold's mystery money and there seemed to be no path forward, they started losing members. Apollo Smith took a job at Douglas Aircraft. Xiansu Shen was too busy with his doctorate to help out. Frank Molina got married and started working at the Department of Agriculture, while Jack and Ed Foreman went back to the Halifax Powder Company. Finally, my favorite, Weld Arnold, their mysterious funder and photographer, dropped off the face of the goddamn earth. He was just gone one day and none of the Rocketeers would ever see him again. He didn't even work at Caltech anymore.
He just dipped.
He's gone. Which would legitimately have me wondering, like, did this guy ever work here? Like, do any of us, can we all agree, is he in any of the pictures? Brackets, he's not in any of the pictures.
He got disappeared.
Did we just imagine Weld Arnold?
Weld Arnold was actually Satan from the...
Oh, he was summoned when Jack was a boy.
Yeah.
And then that's where all the mystery money came from was, don't ask about it.
Finding out that Jack accidentally sold his soul as a child.
Well, shit.
Selling your soul for $1,000 brackets deferred is like the shittiest deal.
The Agape Lodge.
Oh boy. I have waited for this part for a while. And I know you have as well, listener.
Not a fan of any time a semi-religious organization is organized into a lodge.
Oh, it's great. The best part is he gets talent scouted into a cult.
You like your zeal. How would you like to join us?
Yeah. Dude, your knife work on that throat, beautiful. Oh, dude, doing tryouts.
The sacrificial tryout game is going
crazy.
Yeah,
like looking over, everyone else has summoned a devil. Theirs is like massive and buff and has huge wings. Looking at the devil I summoned, and it's like it's a little imp with like one eye.
Hey, you don't know what that little guy can do.
Oh, yeah. Well, he may be tiny, but he's got a lot of character.
He's built
He
different.
has small hands. He's really good at making bombs.
In fact, he made some before this.
Now, in early 1939, Jack was invited to a small social gathering in Hollywood. His hosts were John and Frances Baxter, a brother-sister swinger couple, effectively. And they had drawn Jack in by telling him that the group was based on the work of Aleister Crowley.
That's a name I remember.
That's a name you remember. That's a name a lot of people, like anyone who has listened to any podcast, watched any video about kind of like culty figures, you probably know Aleister Crowley. Jack's interest in Crowley went back a long way, ever since he had read a puzzle book named Conks Pax. And while he'd never really devoted himself to spiritualism, it was something he had dabbled in. Remember how he said that he summoned Satan at a young age, but was too scared to do it again. Apparently he got over his fears because he's going to dive headfirst into this stuff. What Jack was invited to see was the Gnostic Mass of the local church of Thelema, specifically their branch of the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO. The specific lodge was named the Agape, which means brotherly love, but, we can call it the Agape Lodge because that's what happened.
Oh, Lord.
Now, for the sake of brevity, and because I am not an expert in cults or cult leaders, I'm not going to go hard into the history of Crowley, Thelema, or the OTO. But as a primer, the early 1900s were the heyday of spiritualism. A lot of this comes down to the British Empire, where cultural traditions and Eastern religions made their way to the West, along with all of the stolen shit. Aleister Crowley effectively rode that wave. A veteran self-promoter, he frequently found ways of getting himself into the public eye. Like, while writing this, I was trying to think of, like, what nouns I could use to describe him. He was, like, a cult leader, a novelist, a painter. He would, like, do interviews and whatnot, but he was also, like, his main thing was getting attention. And he did that by basically being the boogeyman of every single group he could possibly think of. He was like, at a time when cultural values were incredibly prudish, he was incredibly upfront about being gay, but he also had sex with women all the time anyway. His story is so weird that there is going to be something that interests you. Please go look that up. But that's not what I'm gonna super get into here.
I feel like I remember reading at some point or like watching a video and hearing that he had like a magic fight with some other magic order trying to get upstairs to get into the order or something.
Possibly. I have not run into that one, but I would not put it past him. Anyway, Crowley was also the founder of Thelema, based on the Greek word for will, a religion he was prophet of and whose laws had been handed down to him by Horus, the Egyptian sun god. Now armed with a religion and the ability to make the press whenever he wanted, all Crowley needed was an institution to host his beliefs, and he wasn't going to make it himself. Instead, he orchestrated a hostile takeover of a completely unrelated cult, the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO. Quote, Crowley seized control of the OTO, started a chapter in Britain, and began rewriting its rituals, grafting the Book of the Law into the society's texts and adding the formally choreographed Gnostic Mass as its ceremonial centerpiece. One OTO ritual he preserved, however, was the use of sex as an intrinsic component of the working of magic. So you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
Sex magic. I also just love the idea of, like, you can do a hostile takeover of a cult. Crowley just seized control of a different cult and fully rewrote it to his religion instead.
That's just, wow.
It works.
I mean, it makes sense. You have a group of people who are, like, very easily swayed by charismatic leaders. If you're just more charismatic than their current leader.
Having a sex magic fight with the leader of the OTO and then coming out on top. In every sense of that sentence.
All right. What I heard, was not like a sex magic fight. It was like he was trying to get up the stairs. I think it was in his takeover of OTO. One of the higher up, they just like waved their hands and said words at each other as he walked up the stairs.
And then what they don't tell you is that, the other guy just like melted into sludge then and there. So yeah, in the early 1900s, Crowley is the head of Thelema. He's the head of the OTO. He is considered, I think the quote about him is that he is the wickedest man in the world. And he loved that kind of attention. He lived for it. He explicitly went out of his way to court that kind of attention from the media because it got him more followers. It got people like asking questions about him. It was all good advertising. But that was in like 1912. And by 1939, Aleister Crowley was destitute and the OTO was circling the drain. While I don't really want to get into, like, there's a lot of discourse about did he actually believe in Thelema or was it like a grift the whole way through? I think a lot of the historical consensus is that he was a believer, but at the same time, he also wanted to make a fuck ton of money. Part of that is that, like a lot of cults, Thelema was basically pay to pray, where a devotee could only advance up the ranks by donating more and more cash. To give you an idea, the level at which you would be taught magic, the level at which you would finally learn the secrets of how to do magic, was level 9. You started at level 0. And there's only 10 levels, so the only way to get to actually learn how to do magic is to buy your way up 9 fucking ranks.
I'm tired of this pay to win, Cole.
I know.
There's no in-cult currency either. You have to spend money.
The balancing is just bored.
Accidentally rolling a legendary sex magic technique out of my my like Crowley
My level
box.
2 case.
Getting a new skin has a really dark meaning in reference to like a cult.
So this kind of like money grubbing attitude even extended to where they would open up local franchises. When the Hollywood chapter of the OTO was founded as the 𝕿𝖊𝖊𝖑𝖊𝖒, which again means brotherly love, I almost said brotherly lodge. Oh well, agape. It was founded in 1928 by Wilfred Smith. And whenever it was, Crowley gave them, explicitly, he gave them the mission of finding a, quote, rich man of the West, or RMW in Crowley's letters. And the idea was basically, we need to find a really rich guy who can fund my lifestyle. On top of just getting like a bunch of normal kind of culty people in, there was always this underlying, like they were talent scouting for rich people who could get really drawn into the cult.
And this is just like mobile game predatory tactics down to we need to find a whale.
Yeah. Oh, and the funniest part is they think Jack is that whale, but they never realize how poor he is. As for the actual ritual Jack attended, it wasn't nearly as wicked or exciting as some stories make it out to be. Being basically a normal Catholic mass with the script edited and the sexual tension turned up to 11. Like a lot of his like book of the law, like Thelema, is just kind of plagiarized because Crowley was not a hard worker.
As evidenced by his heavy usage of his charisma.
Well, also the fact that he stole Horus from the ancient Egyptian myths. He was just like, oh, Horus told me, and I'm making a new religion. Horus got tired of all those Egyptians, and he decided to put me in charge, which is, he's a British dude, and he's colonizing Egyptian myth.
They're just looking for someone that's built different.
Horus has been waiting all this time for a white savior, and that's me. Quote, the priest handed out goblets of wine and cakes of light, thicker and more robust than normal communion wafers, and read out a long and obscure list of saints. Fictional characters tripped fast on the heels of authors. Gods were paired with men. Dionysus followed 𝕬𝖊𝖊𝖑, the founder of Taoism. Pan preceded Pythagoras. The Victorian poet Swinburne came fast after Heracles. I do like making Pythagoras a saint of your religion. I think that's cool.
I'm imagining how that would go today, like putting Shadow the Hedgehog into my pantheon. Like,
no, that absolutely.
No. Stop that.
Saint Umbra, what shall I do?
I do like how they're like, yeah, we've got cakes of light, and unlike those Catholics, they're thicker and more robust. It's like,
yo, you want
are they still
communion?
just flavorless though? It's like, I don't want more of a communion wafer. It's not like a good thing to eat. It's not like, oh yeah, I love the taste of communion wafer.
It's going to be chocolate chip.
They just looked at like double stuff Oreos and they just, oh, we need to do that, but with communion wafers.
Yeah, and the instant red flag that they're like, we should do communion wafers, but you should have more of it. That's what everyone's always wanted from church, more of this.
I'm also just like, it would be the most relatable thing in the world if Crowley was just like, we made them bigger because I go to mass, but they only let me have one cookie. I want more of the communion wafers. I'm hungry. Like going to mass, but you get all you can eat communion wafers would actually kind of rule if I could put like a little bit of peanut butter on there. Red jam, the blood.
So guys.
Oh no.
I've done a quick Wikipedia search of what a cake of light is.
Is it a sex thing? Am I going to regret this?
Have a quick read.
Well, if it's about what I'm literally about to... Yeah. No. I know. So read that.
Yeah.
I knew that Natural Harvest was going to come into this at some point.
So for context, listener, what we're reading is we're looking at the Wikipedia for cakes of light, and it does make a point that they are supposed to be made with semen, menstrual blood, vaginal fluids, or a mix thereof. Unfortunately, the ritual, the mystery was kind of ruined a little bit when someone told Jack, quote,
we make the cakes of light with animal blood. They should really be made with menstrual blood.
I love the idea of someone apologizing to Jack Parsons, like, are you sure? Are you sure?
Sorry, it's not up to snuff.
We're cutting corners at the Thelema temple.
Listen, we tried. My wife dry, bone dry, unfortunately. Is goat okay?
This still implies someone busted in the batter.
It's just so funny to me that no matter where in society you go, everyone's always cutting corners. Everyone's always like, we can't actually get that.
I appreciate the pragmatism, though. I do appreciate that it's just did no one bring the menstrual blood? Fine.
Just
fine,
the enshittification of your religion.
The enshittification of my cult.
Yeah, they don't even put bodily fluids in there anymore. Like someone spits in it, but it's not the same.
Did you know that these cakes of light are actually like 70% air? It's bullshit. I've been weighing them every year, and they get smaller and smaller. There's barely any semen in here.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even do that anymore. Sometimes they just spin in it. Sometimes they just, stick their finger in it and swirl a bit.
I could easily see them doing like in the same way that the blood of Jesus is the wine. I could see Crowley going like, well, what is semen but water? So we just put the water in there, and the water represents the semen, and everyone's just like, man, I wanted to eat cum.
Are you proposing that the water that wine to blood was the Catholic Church early cutting corners?
It was my turn this week.
Well, I mean, we ran out of Jesus blood, guys. We have to think of something. Or like actually in the story, like Jesus very wisely going like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't make my blood and my flesh the thing that they ingest. Blood and bread, boys. That's it. Yeah, no, same difference.
Yeah. You know what? I respect that. Jesus knew about communicable diseases, and he's like, no, I don't want children. You're gonna get like some weird disease. Like never touch another person's blood.
This blood stuff's getting really expensive, but we do have a lot of grapes, actually.
The brain blast right there.
Yeah. But on the other hand, imagine what a holy prion would do to you.
Ooh, that's a dangerous concept.
Trench Crusade, hire me. I will redo all your lore, but better.
Just plunging a Caprice on straw into a Metachrist.
Now, Jack was immediately interested in the agape and Thelema. It seemed to, like, the way he described it, it seemed to fill a hole in his psyche that rocketry and comic books just couldn't. Another step in Jack's long journey for enlightenment. And yet, the cult had to be careful. Remember, they want him. They don't want him to just be like a casual guy who shows up every other week. They want him to be an invested member of the cult. And crucially, they want him to put a lot of money into it. Never mind the fact that Jack has no money and he's working for free. He is mooching off of his wife for rocket parts. They didn't know that. They just knew that he was the famous scientist who was in all of the newspapers for making that pipe bomb that one time.
I guess that is kind of still true today, is like you tell people like, yeah, I test rocket motors. And they're like, oh, you must like make a lot of money. No, I make the medium bucks.
Yeah. It turns out that aerospace does not pay.
I mean, it does. It's just not like,
well, yeah.
You get to be solidly middle class.
I'd be making significantly more if I went into trades like my brother. Now, with all of that, Wilfred Smith, the head of the Agape Lodge, immediately identified him as a possible rich man of the West, and he started like a program to kind of slow roll Jack into the Agape Lodge. And it actually kind of failed. It worked for a different reason. Wilfred Smith fully failed to bring Jack into the lodge. Jack just radicalized himself. He did his own research, and it destroyed his brain.
He induced his own holy prion.
Like, for example, he goes in early 1939, January 1939. He would only go back one more time that year, and it was for a completely secular, like, they just had a dude's birthday party, and Jack was invited. There was no ritual or anything. He just kind of showed up for birthday cake without menstrual blood in it, presumably.
Don't forget what's in that frosting.
But while the OTO tried to use kid gloves to make Jack their future piggy bank, he was just radicalizing himself reading all of Crowley's books. He also hated Wilfred Smith, like, interpersonally, and he wasn't a fan of all of the rituals. He wasn't a fan of the Gnostic Mass or the Cakes of Light or whatnot, but he did love magic, which he fully became convinced was actually just a holistic form of quantum physics. And I want to take a second to remind listeners that back then there was a heavy overlap between new sciences and mysticism. Jack worked in Jack worked in a field that most of his peers thought was sci-fi comic bullshit. Scientists were positing that particles act differently depending on if you look at them or not. Albert Einstein figured out that time works differently depending on how fast you're going. To us, this can be well-founded science, but back then, like, science was magic. And so magic kind of got a free ride along with science. For someone like Jack, the question, or for a lot of people back then, and the reason why this was the heyday of spiritualism, was basically asking, like, so you're telling me that a cat in a box with poison is both alive and dead at the same time, but you're telling me that it's ridiculous that sex has magical powers. You know, like, science was magic back then, so exactly drawing the line. This is not to, like, say that it's a good idea or that, you know, Jack was operating in the best of scientific principles when he did this. It's just that it was easier back then to go down that rabbit hole, if that makes sense.
It kind of does.
Still, though, he takes this way beyond quantum physics. Jack and Helen were officially brought into the Agape Lodge as members in 1941. Helen was given the name Soror Grimode, while Jack normally identified himself with his numerology name, 210. He also signed all of his letters from then on, including at Galset with 210.
Huh.
Showing how much of a dweeb he truly was, Jack also made his Thelemic motto spell out the initials TOPAN, Tupan, as a sort of like prayer. He can't do anything normally. He can't even join a cult normally.
He's got to have his own
wife winds up with a
spice.
cool name, and he's like, what shall the spirits know you as? 210. What?
Don't worry, they already know me.
I've organized this Thelemic prayer so that the acronym is also a prayer. Jack, you're supposed to be having sex, not doing math.
No, he's just doing this the entire time. I'll just blow him backs out.
I'm having a brain blast, Helen. Do you mind? I'm weighing the contents of these cakes of light. I bet they didn't even cut it with semen. I gave them semen, and it's not even in here. Why did I make him that guy from Office Space? I made him the stapler guy from Office Space. But they put me in the basement, and they didn't even give me anyone. I didn't have a partner in the orgy. I was the last one picked, and
they left me on the cook stool.
Finding out that the cuck stool is actually like that would work in with like the Jack believing that magic is quantum physics, because he's just like, I am observing the sex, I am observing the magic, and it is a powerful feeling.
But yeah, who do you think orchestrates the magic ritual?
Well, I mean, you could have a lead from the front kind of situation. I don't know, like applying engineering principles and like the current organization ideas to a cult, to a sex cult, is very funny to me. And I need to like think this through. Last time we talked about the orgy Gantt chart. Now I want to see like the family, the company organization tree, effectively. I almost said family tree there, and I do want to remind you that some of the people who invited Jack in were a brother-sister swinger duo.
Yeah, I just didn't mention. I didn't mention anything about that earlier because I'm like, I don't even want to know.
Well, I don't think they had sex with each other, but the man fell in love with Jack, and the brother fell in love with Jack, and the sister fell in love with Helen. Now, Jack rose through the ranks of the OTO rapidly. He was even granted a discount compared to what a normal member would have to pay for a promotion, and he started trying to recruit more people to the cult. He didn't have a lot of money, but he was, in all senses, like, he was the RMW that they wanted. He didn't have any luck with the Suicide Squad members, and he also brought some sci-fi authors along to an orgy, but they were unimpressed. But he did manage to snag Helen's sister, Sarah Northrup. She will become important later because she marries L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh.
As well as Grady McMurtry, a Caltech student who was interested in rockets. He was like, this kid was effectively just like, hey, can I join up with the Suicide Squad? No, but I know what you can join up with. And that's how he found his way into a sex cult.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why the other members of the Suicide Squad wouldn't. I mean, you know, what if Jack had joined the Communist Party? Maybe that would have filled the hole of the like the spiritual higher purpose kind of hole that he was looking to fill. Like, you know, they had all figured it out. They had all joined the Communist Party, and they're like, okay,
what is the orgy cuck stool but what ZN is doing, playing his recorder in the corner?
Oh no.
No, I do agree. Like, I think if he had just joined the Communist Party, he would not have needed. Like, he would have been spiritually fulfilled by the organizing for his class and like in towards labor. But instead
he had to just get weird with it.
Yeah. The downside, though, like if he had joined both, like the guy's a workaholic. I'm sure he could have made time to go to both all the time. Then, like that would have been even worse. He'd be like, right now, Jack Parsons is known as the sex cultist who helped invent rockets. If he had joined the Communist Party, I have no doubt in my mind that the sex cultist part would never enter into the story. He would just be like, that fucking communist, and brackets did some other stuff too. Hello, listener, and welcome to the mid-reel ad. If you enjoy Failure to Launch, more bad space history, and you want to hear more of it more often, there is an option, the FTL Patreon. Signing up at any tier gets you access to monthly bonus episodes and Q&As, and joining an elevated tier gets you even more content, like Chris-narrated minisodes. If that sounds good, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/failure to launch. And now, back to the episode.
Military missiles.
At around the same time Jack Parsons found his spiritual future, things started to turn around for the Suicide Squad. And yes, those two things are causally linked in Jack's head. He thinks that he banged his way into their group getting good deals.
He watched enough sex that it just made it better.
No, Frank, 𝕿𝖍𝖊𝖑𝖊𝖒, sit right there. Sit right there and watch. It will make things better, trust me. Helen, get over here.
Zen, you better not stop playing that flute.
Zien, not now. Now, the group's mentor and sponsor, Theodore von Karman, sat on a board at the National Academy of Sciences, or NAS, focused on military aircraft. And in 1939, with the specter of a new world war on the horizon, he asked Frank Molina to give the group a presentation on the military and scientific applications of rockets. Specifically, the Army Air Corps, which was before the U.S. Air Force, wanted a way to shorten a combat-loaded plane's takeoff distance. Molina went to Washington, and he gave the pitch of a lifetime. But crucially, he never talked about rockets. Remember that the word rocket is tied to Buck Rogers' comic book fantasies in the minds of most scientists. Yeah, you're getting there. And pitching rockets to the Army would have been a non-starter. Instead, Molina pitched Jet-Assisted Takeoff, or JATO.
You just strap this bottle onto your plane and
if anyone ever asks, like, yeah, hey, like, where's the intake? This thing looks an awful lot like a rocket. No. It's a jet. It's a jet. Trust me.
You see that coming out the back? That's a jet.
I think that was literally their reasoning, is that a jet of hot air is coming out of the back.
Legally, yeah.
Yeah, there's no rocks here.
All you
need to see, no rocks.
No rocks.
I mean, for comparison, this would be like going to in the minds of the U.S. military, it'd be like someone going up to them and saying, "Yeah, I've got this great design for a warp drive ship with phasers," and they'd be like, "Oh, you're talking about Star Trek." So that's why you have to use words like
directed energy weapon,
high energy directed energy.
Yeah, they have to play around with this. And even though the Suicide Squad never had any intention of testing anything like a jet engine, they quickly renamed all of their rockets into jet propulsors, and it worked. The NAS gave them the princely sum of $1,000 for an initial study, though this would quickly become a full-on government operation. Overnight, the fortunes of the Suicide Squad had turned. Jack and Ed Foreman were given full-time salaries of $200 a month, more than double what they made at the powder factory.
Oh, hell yeah.
And then Jack, being Jack, blew his entire first paycheck on expensive cigarettes that he chain-smoked while working on the rockets.
You know what? I can support that. That's king shit.
He got them imported from the Soviet fucking Union, which for some reason, the Soviet cigarettes were quote-unquote expensive, and this becomes a thing. Like, whenever he goes to the cult, everyone at the cult is like, yo, look at that guy with, like, those weird Soviet cigarettes. He must be a big deal.
I love how, like, stoopy and insular the cult members are, dude. Like, they don't do anything. Like,
they don't do any research. They know that Jack Foreman is a big deal, and they think that he's, like, a millionaire or something, whenever he's actually just, like, he's making kind of decent money now, and he's blowing all of it on cigarettes, on Soviet cigarettes whose name is the Russian word for, like, smokestack.
Yeah, it's the blowing it on Soviet cigarettes is just wild to me. Like it's not even like a Cuban cigar is a thing that is actually, like,
prestigious
quality.
Yeah.
But a Soviet cigarette, it's like, didn't they make those things as cheaply and as, like, as possible?
Oh, just no filter, just the mental image of him fucking hacking a dart, sprinting across campus, just dragging it the entire time.
Oh no, that happens constantly.
He's propelled by the smoke. It does not affect him.
There are a bunch of pictures later on where like the team is all assembled and either Parsons is not in them or Parsons is like barely in the corner because he has to be sprinting everywhere to get stuff done.
Yeah, to get more cigarettes.
But if you thought that working for the government would help formalize and professionalize how the Suicide Squad worked, you'd be wrong. Within days of getting their new grant, the Caltech campus was shaking from the sounds of Parsons rockets detonating in their test stands. Tension also remained in the group, with Melina in particular trying to rein in Jack and Ed's, I'll call it casual, approach to safety. Quote, on one occasion, in their hut outside the Galset building, Parsons was testing a volatile ethylene and gaseous oxygen mixture as a possible liquid fuel. Melina was sitting on a stool, marking down the numbers on various gauges connected to the rocket, when he remembered that Carmen had asked him to deliver a typewriter to his home. It's unclear whether the removal of Melina's controlling presence provoked Parsons to push the apparatus too far or whether the equipment simply had a structural fault, but shortly after Melina left, 2 huge explosions cracked through the monastic quiet of Caltech's buildings. Smoke billowed upwards and a crowd rushed out from the nearby buildings. They found blackened concrete, burnt sandbags, and a shaken Parsons and Foreman clutching their heads. An oxygen line had caught fire and ignited the oxygen tank itself. When Melina returned from Carmen's, he saw that one of the gauges from the apparatus had been propelled deep into the concrete wall, exactly where his head would have been had he stayed.
The typewriter saved him.
So, like, if he, Von Carmen accidentally saved his life, because if he had stayed, he would have had a hole punched through his head by an oxygen gauge.
I like the idea that Von Carmen isn't like a silly, goofy guy.
No, he's a
just really
chaos
smart.
agent.
No, it's not that he's a chaos agent. He does everything methodically and on purpose. If he fucks up your thing, it's a growth opportunity for you.
Yeah, it's because it was going to detonate whenever you tested it. He's just going through like, no, wrong, smash, smash, smash.
You see, you designed this wrong. Let me show you. Rips lever.
Actually, you should have had a safety cap on that big red button I leaned on.
I guess that's just like user testing kind of, where it's like, he's just really good at being like, oh, this machine wants me to input a number. I'm going to input like a list drop down, delete all items code.
He's the kind of person, press any button to continue, hits the power button.
Still, the Suicide Squad was able to pull together a feasibility study and present it to the Army, who awarded them with a further $10,000 to build and test these JADO units. Also, Jack asked for $100,000.
Try to think of this shit. That is a freighter full of cigarettes.
So finally, after years of working for nothing and using the mystery money given to them by apparently a ghost, or Satan, the Suicide Squad was now in business. And while they'd previously had moral issues with working on military rockets, the rise of Nazi Germany put things into perspective.
We decided that we were going to use rocketry to defeat fascists. We felt that socially responsible engineers and scientists at that time had a mission to perform.
So, hell yeah, we're gonna kill fascists with these rockets. With that new funding came new recognition. The Suicide Squad became Galset Project Number 1. But it also didn't give them quite as much recognition as you would expect. There was still a heavy stigma around rockets, and especially around Jack and Ed, who were non-Caltech students or faculty. There's actually kind of a fun story where they got invitations to this thing called the Athenaeum, which is this very fancy, very pretentious Caltech faculty dinner. And then Melina found out later that they had actually been given they had meant to be snubbed. Both Ed and Jack were on the faculty list. They should have gone. They were meant to be snubbed, and then they got accidentally invited. And Melina did not have the heart to tell them about this, so they just showed up and had a fun time at the dinner, while everyone who was like, Milliken was basically sitting there like, why the fuck are they there? I tried to insult these guys.
Just Jack just traipsing around. You ever hear of a cake of light?
Yo, what do you put in these buns? No? Oh, okay, alright, no, that's fine. Now, the actual development and testing of JADO is interesting for a couple of reasons. While Jack Parsons is most well known for his work on solid fuels, he did well with both solid and liquid, and wasn't married to either idea the way some engineers were back then, or are today. The NAS didn't particularly care what kind of rocket he used, as long as it worked, could be stored for a long time, and could be used in a war zone. And all of this presented a huge problem for the kind of rocket the Suicide Squad was testing. Liquid fuel rockets using liquid oxygen as an oxidizer. And as we've already talked about, liquid oxygen is cryogenic. It needs to be kept incredibly cold, and it needs delicate, expensive machinery to keep it that way, which makes it very hard to use cryogenic fuels for any kind of military or emergency situation. You have to have them like powered all the time, or you have to load them up a couple of hours ahead. It doesn't work.
I think y'all talked about it every so often when you talk about the R7.
Oh, yeah.
And all that is, you can very much tell that Korolev was like, yeah, I'm telling them it's an ICBM, but I'm building a launch vehicle.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of very good quotes, even videos of like generals watching the process of an R7 being like fueled and launched, and they're just sitting there like, this is taking like 16 hours. America could nuke us within 15 minutes.
I was to say just B-52s or B-29s. Just ripping donuts in the sky.
You have to wait. It's not fair. We have to get our rocket ready. And also, like the R7, this would push them towards, like, because the R7, the cryogenic fuel doesn't work. This would push Jack Parsons and co. towards some of the most toxic fuels imaginable, just like 𝕬𝖊𝖑.
Gotta love hypergalls. They do like a few things really well, and they just kill you the whole time they do it.
For solid fuel rockets, the main problem was how to make it burn. Achieving stable thrust for a set amount of time meant that the fuel had to burn uniformly, and that's something that the black powder mixes the team had worked with previously couldn't really do. In fact, the longest any of them had managed to get a black powder rocket to burn was a measly 5 seconds. In Parsons' mind, the ideal solid rocket would burn like a cigarette, from front to end, and to do that, the fuel would have to be packed into the rocket with no cavities or cracks, which would introduce new surfaces to burn and probably explode. With the help of Molina's calculations and von Karman's notes, Jack came up with the idea of packing a new fuel mix, officially called 𝕿𝖭𝖊𝖑 and known to the team lovingly as the Goop, into a rocket using a hydraulic press.
The Goop.
The Goop. It was difficult to work with and had to be repressed every time an inch of goop was added, but it finally gave them what they were looking for: the world's first uniformly burning solid rocket fuel. So they had to pour an inch and then put the hydraulic press in, and then pour another inch and then put the hydraulic press in. So it was this like very time-consuming process. But considering that their earlier method was just pouring a bunch of black powder in, it worked better, much better.
I really hope Jack wasn't too close to that process. Who knows what he's putting in the goop?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You look at the issue with early solids and using a black powder is that, one, black powder is not, because it's a mix of three things and there's defined ratios. In modern times, it's a very standardized process, but it's still like there's a lot of opportunities for the mix to be slightly different, to be, or for the base components to not be as like exact.
Right.
So you get impurities. When you pack it in, unless you're packing it really well, you're going to get little inclusions and cracks, as you said. And anytime you have a crack, hole, or spot where your surface area, your burning surface area rapidly expands, that means there's going to be a rapid expansion of pressure. And that's, more pressure than the case can handle means your motor is no longer a motor.
Inclusions are terrible in every industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of solutions to that. One of them is binders. So some of the early work with black powder was, okay, can we put this in some sort of binder where we can compress it with something to fill the gaps? Sugar rockets is another way people got around that, by basically melting the sugar with what all goes into a sugar rocket. I've never made one because modern propellants are available online.
Are they?
Yeah, you can order from Estes. You can order propellant cartridge kits.
Okay, I know the cartridge kits. I thought you meant like I could pour my own.
Yeah, I mean you could. If you had all this stuff, but like sugar rockets, like you can make that on a stove, and you melt it and then pour it and cast it. So that's another way to get around that. But yeah, so that is interesting how Jack said burning from the end like a cigarette, because that's not actually what you want to do. You want to burn from an internal tube and you want to burn outward. That maximizes surface area. And it also means that the thickness of what needs to be cast you don't have as thick of a cast that you're hardening. It also means you have a lot more options with grain geometry, because the thrust of a motor is limited by how much surface area you can burn at a time. So if you do an end burner, which, a lot of rockets do, is you just burn from burn from the end.
Yep.
Your surface area is the diameter of your motor, but when you use a central, hole through the grain, you can change your geometry to increase or decrease surface area as it burns. And that's why you get thrust profiles on modern solid rocket motors, because it's not a constant surface area.
It's not just it's not just a cylinder with a hole in it. You will see like at different points, the geometry will change based on when it gets to burning that point. It will have more or less.
For example, the space shuttle, a lot of it is just a central hole, but there's parts where they do a star grain because they want a bit more thrust at the start, and as it burns, that surface area burns out, and then you actually have a reduction in total surface area as the star points burn out, and you're just left with a circle. Then so thrust will spike, but then drop off as you go. So yeah, there's a whole grain geometry as a whole design field where you're trying to match what you need. You might put like flanges into it where you specifically leave like spots where you need to burn quickly at the start but want it to go down, or you might have a geometry designed to like slowly increase in surface area as you burn.
Okay.
So like a central hole is good for that because the area of the circle gets bigger as it burns out. But yeah, so Jack was on to one thing, but the end burning like a cigarette is not exactly what you want.
Yeah, and thankfully, the industry has evolved since that. But that is how they designed their first SRBs and the first ones that went into JATO units. The team also progressed towards shelf-storable liquid rocket fuels. While alcohol could work well, Frank Molina learned about a liquid called aniline, which had the useful property of being hypergolic, which means that it'd ignite as soon as it mixed with an oxidizer. This did make it incredibly hazardous to work with, but it also meant they could cut an ignition system out of the rocket, making it much more simple. For an oxidizer, and preemptive "you're welcome," quote, Parsons had stumbled upon red fuming nitric acid, a solution of nitric acid and nitrogen dioxide, better known as RFNA. It was by no means an ideal answer. It was highly poisonous and very corrosive, and Parsons' trousers and hands had been burned yellow and brown from the toxic vapors it released.
Oh God.
I need to be clear, to my knowledge, this is the first use of RFNA for rockets.
That's pretty neat.
It would later be used, like the Devil's Venom famously used RFNA. It's been used in the decades since. To my knowledge, Jack Parsons is the first guy to identify, hey, maybe this stuff could be good for rockets.
Yeah, I mean, any modern use of RFNA, like you very quickly went from RFNA to IRFNA, inhibited red fuming nitric acid, but that's just, that's more of a storability modification. And when I say inhibited, that doesn't mean it's any less able to kill you instantly. It's inhibited from eating steel.
Okay.
It's pretty much it. So you can store it in like certain alloys of stainless steel or aluminum, and it doesn't slowly degrade the metal walls and turn those into a sludge at the bottom of your container.
Ooh, I love me some hypergolic steel sludge.
Well, the reason you don't do that is because it just degrades performance of the propellant.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad to know that the concern is not for the safety or longevity. It's just like, well, this is kind of hurting performance.
Well, yeah, because you open up a drum and like it doesn't eat all the way through because at some point it will passivate. It will form a layer on the inside.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you kept it in storage for 20 plus years, maybe, but luckily people didn't store RFNA for super long periods. But it would you're putting a bunch of iron and carbon into your fuel.
Rockets do not like sludge.
Yeah, it's also it makes it denser.
Turning on my rocket and watching as like a steel soft serve just starts coming out of the nozzle.
Well, it's also, you got to think it's reacted now. Like it can no longer react with the fuel because it's already undergone a reaction. Like the oxidation reaction has occurred. So yeah, it was a performance. It was a long-term storage. It was we don't want to keep replacing steel containers every day.
And keeping all of its wonderful properties like being hypergolic and melting flesh.
Yeah.
Some things we have to stick with traditions. Let's be fair, When
you want something that will rapidly oxidize fuels, it's going to rapidly oxidize human bodies.
That's fair.
You don't get a lot of options where it's like, I want it to oxidize only this form of, organic or, this form of molecule. It's like, no, it's going to oxidize everything. And we got carbon in our bodies.
It's the fuel that makes you old.
All right, everybody cut down on the iron intake. Nobody, like, whatever you're eating, red meats, no. If you're going to work with this fuel, you need to be you need to be composed entirely of certain non-reactive molecules.
You need to become Teflon. You need to become polytetrafluoroethylene. You need to become a polymer with a really high bond strength that will not oxidize.
The guy who's just been huffing xenon this whole time just walks up like, I've got this.
Yeah, my protective cloud of xenon.
I can't react with anything like this. So yeah, with those two new developments, workable SRBs and RFNA, the team was finally ready to build and trial their JATO rockets. To support them, the Army upped their funding to $22,000. They used some of the cash to expand their operation, hiring out new staff, and they even tried to win back some of the old members of the squad. Unfortunately, Apollo Smith turned them down, and Zien was Chinese, so the Army didn't let him anywhere near the rockets and denied him a security clearance. Zien Sushen continuing the tradition of just being the most battered down man in rocket science and just continuing to go. I love that man. The group pushed on without them, bought a small Aircoup plane, which is basically like a small little Cessna, and enlisted the help of Captain Homer Boucher, a Caltech student who was also in the Army Air Corps, and he was going to be their pilot. He would immediately regret this decision. See, after one too many explosions, Galsit Project No. 1 was kicked out of Galsit once again, and exiled to the dry lake beds around LA, dragging all of their equipment with them and setting up a sort of shack city in the desert. When Boucher came to visit and check their progress, he reported that they were wandering from shack to shack in various degrees of nakedness. He was particularly dismayed when he checked out the rocket machine he would be flying and saw it being used as a laundry rack for everyone's underwear.
Oh, God.
Is that, so as a test stand engineer, is that a recommended, underwear? Probably no, but could I put a shirt on there?
Just on a rocket casing? Just on
or just any of the scaffolding around it, I imagine.
I mean, you can.
Okay.
It's you wouldn't want to, because you're trying to make it look nice, because when people come and see your test, you don't want to look like.
Okay, but if I'm already wandering around the test stand naked, I probably don't care about making the stand itself look too nice,
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to hurt the
first
stand
impressions
to have
are
clothes
low.
on it. It's not going to hurt the stand to have clothes on it. You do risk that those clothes will never be able to be worn again, because they'll either be burned or they'll be grossly contaminated.
Just watching Captain Boucher's plane just detonate into a mini mushroom cloud, and Molina's just damn it, Commando again.
He's not sad about that.
So yeah, not a great first impression for Captain Boucher. Still, the tests continued, and some of them did explode, and a week later, they were ready, quote unquote, for their first test flight. And I need to be clear here, Jack did not want to do additional tests. He wanted to just bolt these things to the plane and let it rip. However, he was overruled, and the team ran 8 static fire tests in a row with one rocket under each of the plane's wings. They just bolted the plane to the ground. Test 8 saw Boucher climb into the cockpit and take off. I don't know why they didn't ignite them on takeoff, but what he did was he got into the sky, he got into level flight, and then he ignited the rockets. Quote, 2 brilliant white jet trails appeared in the sky behind it, seemingly attached to the Aircoup like cords on a kite. The trails increased in length and the Rocketeers watched, mouths agape. The sight was, after all, in the days before jet trails became commonplace in the world's sky. All seemed serene until one of the trails abruptly cut off. That trail cutting off was that one of the rockets exploded. It blasted a hole in the wing and sent a spray of shrapnel all through the aircraft. They were lucky that Boucher was able to live, let alone land.
Oh, he caught some flack in this?
He didn't get hurt, but they found holes going all through this plane.
Shit.
Thankfully, and one of the only reasons he survived is that the rocket had detonated at the end of its flight. It had burned through most of its fuel and then it detonated right at the end. After some more panicked work, Jack Parsons figured out what was happening. The fresh rockets, they had made all of the rockets at the same time, and the fresh ones that had been used in the morning, they worked great. But the longer a rocket was left out, the more time it had for the fuel to dry out and it would start to form cracks, which, like we talked about, would explode when lit. So for these tests to work, Jack's JATO rockets would have to be fueled and pressed immediately before takeoff. And this was particularly difficult because they were doing this on August 11th, 1941. Their big test demo day in front of the Army was August 12th. Jack and the Suicide Squad worked all through the night, readying another 18 rockets and then speeding down to the airfield before they could go stale. The first takeoff of a JATO-assisted plane in America went off without a hitch. Captain Boucher got the plane taxiing and then hit the igniter on 4 JATO rockets that shot the small plane into the air in record time. They also cut the takeoff distance of the plane by almost half. Over the next 2 weeks, 152 JATOs were used in 62 flight tests, all of which had to be made the night before because Jack didn't have time to fix the stale fuel problem. You can see in pictures and in videos, the Suicide Squad guys into these 2 weeks are just like dead on their fucking feet because they are spending every single night pressing goop into cans.
It's very reminiscent of the sex magic, actually.
Well, guys, we need to stop. We've been doing sex for 2 weeks.
Guys, I'm looking like a raisin over here.
And then Theodore von Karman, whether he's the chaos agent or just a guy having fun, he decided that this military test needed some more entertainment to it. So he came up with the idea of using the last of their JATOs to get the plane into the air from rockets alone. And this really should have killed Captain Boucher. They took the plane, they ripped the entire prop off, and they took the hole where the prop used to be and they put a safety sign on it. And then, quote, once again the silent film pays dumb witness to an astonishing sight. Boucher grips a rope through the open cockpit window of the air coupe with his left hand. The sun glints off the watch he is still wearing on his wrist. The other end of the rope is tied to the back of a truck that is driving down the runway. The plane, its nose swathed in the safety posters, trundles along behind it, gathering speed up to the point, as Boucher said, somewhat below that wherein the arm bone would have been pulled out of the shoulder socket. Letting go of the rope and pulling his arm back into the cockpit, he flicks the ignition on all 12 rockets at once. The plane leaps into the air with a roar, shooting high on a bridge of smoke. It's worth mentioning, the plan was that he would ignite 6 of them and then ignite another 6 for like a boost. No, he just lights, like a reminder, whenever this thing is used for takeoff, they use 4 rockets. He lights 12 of them at once and somehow doesn't die.
He has the need for speed.
And the best part is, it doesn't get him into flight. Basically, because these things are not aligned, they're not aligned with the, center of gravity effectively. Whenever they fire these rockets, it, slams the nose hard into the air. It, pops it, 10, 20 feet into the air, and then the plane just, belly lands hard. Now, tests continued, and the Suicide Squad quickly grew into an entire industrial bureau, not unlike the later Soviet OKBs, right down to their feuding leaders. The NAS upped their budget to $125,000, and they later ran successful tests on liquid fuel JATOs filled with RFNA. Then, in 1942, with the attack on Pearl Harbor, all of the tests and prototypes were replaced with an immediate need for real hardware on real planes. The Army asked the Suicide Squad to prep an order of 60 JATO pods for immediate combat use. This wasn't in their research grant, this wasn't some test. They were a full-on military contractor now, and that also meant they would need to organize as one, set up a full company and everything. The first problem was picking a name. Rockets were still somehow stigmatized, so they stuck with jets. And since these jets would fly through the air, they settled on Aerojet. And that is where I am going to cap off today's episode.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, so this is the weird story of how Aerojet comes into being.
Aerojet rocket dynamite, but wasn't.
I was waiting for JPL as the big drop there, but I guess that hasn't happened yet.
It has not happened yet, unfortunately.
No, it was just Aerojet, and then they got sucked into Pratt Rocketdyne. That became the conglomerate we know and love.
It's this whole thing. These guys just keep. I don't know. I knew they were involved, but in reading this story, I was not aware of how soon, how Aerojet. I thought it was some company that some of them wound up working at. I wasn't aware that it was straight up just the Suicide Squad collectively going oh shit, we need a company now. For what it's worth, Theodore von Karman's vote for the name was Superpower.
Okay, not bad, but
Could be
but
better.
it was shot down because it sounded like Superman and everyone was concerned about it sounding like comic books. So yeah, bit of a weird one, bit of a lot of disparate things happening.
Yeah, you don't say.
But that is our part 2 of the story on Jack Parsons. We have covered Jack being in court, the downfall of the Suicide Squad, Jack finding Thelema, and the sudden burst of activity that turned the Suicide Squad into Aerojet. How's everyone feel?
Shocking revelation about one of the largest providers of solid rocket motors in the United States.
Yeah.
But not unsurprising when
No.
you think about like, oh, well, I mean, they had to start somewhere. Like, there wasn't that many people doing this at the time.
And why wouldn't they start with a weird sex magician?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, the domino effect for me is like weird cult sex magic, but the little domino and then the big domino, the foundation of Aerojet as a company.
And especially because Jack being in the weird cult is going to become a problem for his professional work later.
Ooh.
But yeah, I hope this has been fun for everyone. I hope everyone has learned a couple of fun things about space history and
Dropped a bombshell for me. Jesus.
this truly weird man within it. And guest Chris, thank you again for coming on and giving like some more professional insight into how weird and how, like, you know, I would not have otherwise thought that like Jack Parsons like got the cigarette thing wrong. But before we cap things off, we have a professional space engineer here, which means we are going to ask him questions from you, the listeners, from you, the patrons. If you would like me to inflict your questions on a professional, consider joining the FTL Patreon. So, this is a fun one because last time we made fun of civil engineers.
I want to be clear, I did not make fun of
No,
civil
you
engineers. I
said they were
amazing.
wizards with concrete or something to that effect. Here's a question for you. As a civil engineer, anchoring things so they don't move is always a challenge. I'm fascinated by the amount of force involved in an engine test. Is there a surprising number of typical commercial anchors like Hilti bolts, etc.? Or is everything connecting rocket to concrete all specially designed and constructed?
So the answer to that question is I'm not a civil engineer, so I really don't. I don't know. I just know that there's a bolt pattern that I connect the stand to.
Yeah, dude, why are you asking me to do your job?
I will say, I think in any case, you're just going to try to use a COTS, commercial off-the-shelf fastener, because you're going to want interchangeability. You're going to be able to order new parts. You don't want to have to build a specific part every time. And there's a broad range of thrust levels in engine testing, motor testing. So when I say motor is something that imparts momentum to me. Like there's a lot of engine is something that is making shaft work specifically. I don't call a solid booster an engine as much as possible because to me that's a motor. An engine would be something with like a turbo pump assembly where there's actually something spinning. It's more complex. So I try not to say engine because like engine testing to me involves a lot more plumbing. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of a term used kind of by people. It's how I was like at my workplace. People use that reference generally. That's how they break it out. So that might not be a universal thing. That might just be a specific like. You'll find you're an engineer. You go to a workplace, and then everyone's got their own terminology, and it might be kind of wrong. And everyone says things slightly different, and they mean the same thing. So motors vary in thrust class. Like you fired some motors that they're putting like 500 to 1,000 pounds of thrust. You have like a block that you put it on that's like you can forklift and move around. A lot of times for stuff like that, you try to have. In general, we try to have like a standard attachment pattern. So we'll have like a face with a known bolt or slot pattern where you can just use certain standard bolts and everything. And it'll just be a universal spot you can attach your thrust, your actual like test fixturing to. So you're not having to design a new thing every time. It's just, okay, I have two I-beams, I put it on and I attach it to a slotted plate up front that I can, screw the bolts down onto. The stuff that is permanently on the test stand, the base of the test stand, what you actually connect anything test specific to, and the concrete itself. And I'm not too sure what connectors are used there. I think generally you probably try to go COT because you don't want to have to be getting specialized parts.
Not to mention if something breaks, much easier to repair it with COTS.
Yeah, and then it's easier to buy bolts and stuff because you know your pattern. If you have a really specialized application, you might get specialized fasteners. A lot of times there's a rebar frame inside that you take like a chunk of metal with a bolt pattern in it and you just attach that directly to the rebar in the concrete.
Okay.
Because you want to have a very firm connection in the concrete. You want the force to be dispersed over a large area. You don't want it tearing out. So you attach directly or put like a big J bolt on it or something. So it's got a lot of grab into the concrete. It depends on that. Again, I'm not a civil engineer. When that part of testing, like I've when you build a test stand, the civil engineer is the one who does that side of the work. We say we expect loading like this in this direction. We want this pattern on the face.
Circling back around to the fact that a civil engineer has asked you a civil engineering question that they should really know. This is your wheelhouse. So I got another question for you. This is something that we mentioned last time, but throttleable solid rockets. So the question is, I have heard about the concept of throttleable solid rockets. Could you please enlighten us all about the mechanics required to get that to work? And what about the possibility of multiple restarts?
So Pendel is generally a big way it's done. That's been like a subject of research for years, where you just have a thing that you stick in and out of the nozzle to lock it or open it up a certain amount. And then you have a propellant that's designed at certain pressures to go into lower thrust state or higher thrust state or shut off completely. So like if there's not enough pressure, the propellant can't continue burning.
So like basically you constrict or widen the nozzle, and I imagine with a normal fuel, if you constrict the nozzle, your pressure is going to skyrocket and you might get an explosion. But you're saying there are kinds of fuels that they will not burn as hard.
No, you don't ever really want to fully close.
Okay, so sorry, like restrict, like just make it slightly smaller, like not like narrow your aperture.
Yeah, like in a solid rocket motor, higher pressure generally means higher burn rate. That's why when you start burning additional surface area and you increase the pressure, it's a runaway effect where the pressures increase, so the burn rate increases, so the surface area burning increases, and it just builds on itself. So higher pressure, higher burn rate. You design fuels that are kind of actually really bad at burning at like sea level or at like low pressure, because sea level is only 14.7 psi, whatever that is in metric.
Some number of kPAs, I'm sure.
Yeah, since I work in American engineering, everything's told to me in like imperial units, so that's what's in my head a lot. But like,
don't worry, I work in Canadian engineering, so it's 50-50.
Yeah, so 14 something psia compared to like a rocket motor that 500, 1000 psi, 2000 psi. It depends on design, so at higher pressures it'll burn faster. So you start restricting the nozzle by sticking a Pendel. So you've got like your nozzle and you're sticking like I'm making hand gestures and using like a pen, and I realized this is an audio only medium.
We will put emojis in the description that like show the rough hand motions.
Yeah, so basically like you're sticking a Pendel into the center of the nozzle or extending or retracting through there to change how much, because it's like a tapered top of the Pendel. So like the further you stick it in, the more it closes, the further you pull it out, the more it opens. And when you like fully open, generally your design is when you fully open it, it's at a low pressure case. So the motor propellant would like reduce burn rate or shut off or just extinguish because there's not enough pressure to keep the burn going. That's generally how it's done. It depends. There's a lot of companies with a lot of specific properties they use, and then a lot of proprietary information on like this is exactly what we use. This is how we design our nozzle and everything. So basically, you try and open or close the nozzle. Try to open or close the nozzle by changing the area, basically your throat area, to change how much pressure will build up and how fast the propellant burns. For relight, basically you design a propellant that at low pressures extinguishes, that can't continue burning, and then you have a bunch of more igniters.
Okay.
So you just have a multiple ignition train, and you design those so they don't set each other off. So you can set off one initiator igniter combo, burn it one, extinguish it, set off another. And it's been like the history of this is pretty long, and like this has been a field of research for years, because you can imagine I want a storable rocket that I can stick in a shelf for 20 years, pull off the shelf, ignite, and it goes, and I still have that throttle performance.
Yeah.
I can ignite on an instant. I don't ever have to worry about like oh, do I need to fuel this? You know, with the fuel.
Is it going to eat
Do I
through
need
my
to-
tanks and my staff?
Yeah. So basically you have multiple igniters and you change your nozzle throat area.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, guest Chris. I said it I said it last episode as just kind of an offhand. You do not have to go by guest Chris if you don't want to.
No, that works. That's great.
Okay. So in that case, thank you, guest Chris, for answering those questions. And thank you for being on this episode to lend us your professional insight, as well as to learn fun things about the incredibly freaky people who helped found your field.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been kooks. It's just good to know more.
No,
about
there's kooks and then there's freaks. And I think a fair number of these guys are freaks. And I think everybody is kooks in the space industry.
Yeah, I think the communion wafer kind of sealed.
Oh, yeah. No, that although that isn't necessarily like, I don't know if we can blame the space industry for the biscuit of life or whatever. Cake of light. Yeah.
Yeah. I even said communion wafer.
We have to remember they had to make a substitution. They just didn't have any handy. But yeah, again, thank you everybody for sitting in on this weird story. I am very excited to talk to everybody next time for part 3. And thank you, listener, for listening, for reading. Thank you, reader. I'm going all over the place. My mind is fried. Thank you, person who is ingesting this content, for ingesting it with us.
Whose brain we are astral projecting into.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Adios.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show. And a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are August Sun, Boss, Charlie, Daniel F., David R., Jorg 2, hotboxing the ISS with beer-flavored vapes, Lane of the Wired, Luke Nukem, 𝕬𝖕𝖔𝖊𝖊𝖕, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Mysterious Stranger, Nerd Beast, Noah, Oil Drum, Pat, Space Northpaw, Spectre Cohen, Spectre 444, Tortilla Baron, and Vivek D. Our space dogs are a Union Thug, a Blinkhan, Act Guy is Best Guy, Adam H, Agent Carter, Angry Old Man Yada Yada, Anthony C, Otto Fox, Band User, Baron M, Ben L, Boomzilla, Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles G, Cole C, Captain Lag, CSD 2016, Daddy Bongo, Double Time, Dr. Shockmaster, Ank, Aaron, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Ian W, Emmanuel L, JM M, James A, James C, Jamie K, John C, John Tastic 20x6, Kara Chameleon, Kate D, Corbin the Dog, Korolev's Condiments, Lens Wipe, M, McLean C, Mar, Nick, Norman W, Number Negative, Panda, PB, Randall, Sam A, Sean H, Sensual Kazoo, Sean P, Sophie L, Sparks, Spencer W, Spirit of Thunder, That Big Sexy, The Best Sean, Thomas M, Tim P, Toasty Ken, Trash Do, Verosh T, Vrisk, Will W, Winksmith, Zap, and Zim.
Albert count 123.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.